Good morning, everyone, and today I have another verse that I would like to share with you all from my devotions this morning. This morning I was reading in Exodus chapter 20, read all the way to chapter 29. As I was making my breakfast and eating my breakfast, I was listening to my Bible and then reading it as I was eating, and I came across this verse in Exodus chapter 20. Exodus chapter 20, verse 20 says, And God Moses, sorry, that was wrong. And Moses said unto the people, Fear not, for God is come to prove you, that his fear may be before your faces, that ye sin not. Now, the fear of the Lord is what is being talked about in this verse. However, this verse almost appears to be a contradiction of itself, because Moses says, first of all, to not fear God, or to not fear God, but to not fear. Now, it's interesting that the that the fear that the people were feeling was based on what was happening at Mount Sinai. At Mount Sinai, God came down, at least showed his presence to the people of Israel upon Mount Sinai. He came down onto Mount Sinai and showed part of his glory to the people of Israel. There were thunderings and lightnings and a sound like a trumpet that kept increasing in volume. God spoke audibly to the people of Israel. There were earthquakes going on. The mountain looked like it was catching on fire. Mount Sinai looked like it was catching on fire. There was smoke. There was a giant cloud over the mountain where God had decided to show himself to the Israelites. And anyone who got too close to the mountain, beyond the perimeter that God told Moses to put there, would be killed instantly, because they were approaching the perfect presence of God. And even animals, if they crossed the line, would be killed. So they were feeling fear of death, fear of being destroyed by this all-powerful God whom their fathers had known, and now they would come to know this God better. And Moses tells them not to fear. He tells them not to fear, and then immediately tells them that God has come to prove them. God has come to prove them and show them who he is and see how they would react. Not that God needed to see how they would react, because God knows everything. Time is nothing to God. God is outside of time. He sees everything as if it were now. He knows everything since eternity past. So God already knew what the Israelites would do. He wanted to show them how they would react to his presence and show them who, at least part of who he really is. Why? That his fear would be before their faces. Now that's strange. He would say, Fear not, but then do fear. Moses says, Fear not, but then do fear God. God wanted them to fear him. But the fear that is being talked about is two different types of fear. The first fear that Moses was talking about is the fear of death, fear of sickness, fear of many different things that can cause harm to us, especially physically and sometimes emotionally. We humans are very susceptible to fear, especially in this type that Moses is talking about. However, the fear that is being talked about is the fear of God, which is a different type of fear. It's not one based on necessarily the dangers that God poses to us humans, because God doesn't really pose any danger to us. God is the all-powerful creator and just ruler of the universe, because he was the one who created it. The fear of the Lord being spoken about here is the same fear of the Lord that appears in Psalm 111, verse 10, where it says, The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. A good understanding have all they that do his commandments. His praise endureth forever. The fear of the Lord being talked about here is the Hebrew word yirau, which means reverence. It is a respect for the power and authority that God has over the universe, and a respect for his justice that will be served upon everyone who decides to disobey what God has set as right and wrong. God is the one who decided what is right and wrong. And if we disobey what he has said as right and wrong, we become we will become the recipients of his justice and his anger. This fear that is being talked about is a reverence for who God is, his power and his authority. He is the omnipotent creator of the universe, ruler of it by ownership, by owner of it because of the fact that he created it. And this fear is very important. Why? Because the verse says, that ye sin not. The fear of the Lord will keep us from sinning and disobeying God's will, because we know that he will execute his justice upon whoever disobeys his commandments. This fear of the Lord is what can help a Christian keep himself holy and pure before God. Now, a Christian should have more than the fear of God. What Jesus Christ did on the cross for every Christian, for every person who has put their trust in Jesus Christ, what he did for us should produce in us a love for God that will lead us to a life that honors and glorifies God. The fear is what takes us away from sinning, and the love of God is what leads us to do his will and obey what he has told us to do. So let's remember to have the reverence that we should for God, for his power, his authority, and the fact that he does not tolerate sin in any way, shape, or form. Let us have the fear of the Lord.